Bills Mafia, what is going on? Good evening. Happy Thursday. How are we doing tonight? Welcome to this week's episode of Buffalo Late Night on the Cover One Sports Network. We got a jam-packed show for you tonight. Truly. I'm your host, Thomas DeLoss. Glad that you have chosen to hang out with us tonight. It's been a very weird couple days here in Western New York. We're still dealing with the smoke. As a mailman, kind of over it. Kind of tired of it. Not something I was too, really interested in. But hey, we're going in with the flow. Guys, thank you for tuning in tonight. Or if you're listening on Spotify, happy Friday to you. You can find our show free on all social media and streaming platforms, including Spotify and YouTube, or however you pod. If you're watching on Twitter right now, guys, come on. Hop on over. Come join us. Be part of the conversation. We'd love to have you. Also, want to make sure you guys are hitting that subscribe button on our YouTube page and that notification button as well. That's going to let you know every time any one of our shows are live here on the Cover One Network, including Buffalo Late Night. Also, super chats are open. So if you want to have me see what you're saying, if it's something important, go ahead and hit that super chat, type it in, and we'll get right to you. Now, like I've said a couple different times, I do have some exciting news. I've got two fantastic giveaways going on right now. If you head on over to my Twitter page, you will see the first is pinned at the top as I'm giving away some Buffalo Bills tickets. I said that correct. Buffalo Bills tickets. And the second is for a copy of Madden 24. Make sure you go and hit that follow button on my Twitter to be entered. My brother Ian will throw that stuff in the chat. Some good stuff. Tickets are hard to come by. I'm giving those away for free, so get yourself some free tickets. Also, guys, we are now officially 1 month away from the Buffalo Bills training camp. It's going to be literally here. It's probably even less than 1 month, to be honest with you. Make sure you guys subscribe to Cover One. We are delivering all the best content, all the best analysis. You guys saw the other night, Greg Russo, Groot, a guy that I personally have said multiple times is going to break out the season. He sat down with Ant and he sat down with Eric Turner for some unbelievable film breakdown. They talked about it all. Greg gave some amazing insight. So make sure you're signing up for Cover One Pass. You're going to get all the best coverage, all the best analysis heading into the 2023 season. And that starts with training camp soon enough. Guys, tonight we are going to have some fun. We have one half of the Bills Chat Pod, my buddy Josh McCarty. Josh, what's going on, brother? How you doing?
Doing well, Thomas. Thanks for having me on. Excited to always come on Cover One and chat with my friends over here. So excited to talk about some Buffalo Bills football here that we're only about a month away from.
Yeah, it's an exciting season. We are kind of, I would say, tepid right now. It's been a very weird offseason thus far. A lot going on, yet nothing at all at the same time, per se. It's just been a very weird type of offseason for Buffalo Bills. But what we're going to do before we get into the deep of it all is let's touch on a question that I have for this evening. There was a lot of hubbub on this on the Pat McAfee show. I'm sure you saw about it, about the Bills only having 60,000 seats in their new stadium. The new stadium is obviously a big topic for the Buffalo Bills fans, something we've been waiting for years on, solidifying the future for the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo. Obviously, the big topic is having less seats in the current stadium. What are your thoughts on this, Josh? What do you think about the frustration of fans, the potential of less availability for fans to get seats?
Well, I sympathize with anybody that's trying to buy a ticket to the game that's going to be left out, or somebody that's a season ticket holder that might be told that they can no longer be a season ticket holder. My heart goes out to those people. Unfortunately, I think this is the reality of the NFL. As these stadiums have progressed, seats have gotten better. Seats are now more spacious than they used to be. The club seating, the stuff that they put in the stadium, that's the extra stuff outside of just sitting in the bleachers cheering for your team, that all takes up space. So this is not a unique situation to the Bills. 60,000 seats is low by NFL standards, but the drop from where they're sitting now to where they're sitting at 60,000 is pretty much on par with what we've seen with other stadiums. Now, granted, Dallas and LA are a little bit different scenario. They built palaces. That's not the world we live in. But when this was kind of announced, when Tim Graham from The Athletic was even hinting at this months ago, when that was the rumored number, Luca and I even talked on our show that that's kind of the price of doing business. If you want the added luxuries to your stadium, that space has to come from something. And unfortunately, in a lot of ways, that's just extra seats in the stadium.
Yeah, when it comes to brand new stadiums, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to find fault in different things that they do. I mean, we know the big topic is the fact that it's not a dome or the fact that it's not downtown. When it comes to this and the fact that it's going to be a little bit smaller, and if you have season tickets, you know this firsthand. You're basically standing on top of the person next to you in the current stadium. You are shoulder to shoulder in Highmark Stadium. You got zero legroom if you're anything over 5'6". And quite frankly, the stadium in and of itself is just not fun to be in. The concourses are small. The stadium is antiquated. The bathrooms are gross. And when you make the stadium have less seats, you're opening up area for a lot more things. And I think that's a big thing right now when it comes to this new stadium is that you're going to allow a lot more amenities. Like you said, a stadium that is going to be beautiful. It's going to have 3 to 5 times the size of their current concourse. But the big part about the seating, guys, and I think this is one thing you have to think about, like, Ron Rakuya stated this. If you are a season ticket holder now or you're on the wait list, you will be able to get season tickets in the new stadium. And the reason behind this and what people need to realize is there are going to be fans that are just not going to want to pay for the PSLs. They're not going to want to pay for the current pricing in the new stadium, or just in general, they're just not going to want to get tickets. So there's this weird conundrum in people's minds that they're not going to actually get tickets. I promise you, if you want to get tickets in the new stadium, you will be able to do so. There will be plenty of opportunity. And for my reference, my wife and I have 4 season tickets in the current stadium. One of the I think it was actually, excuse me, the very first episode of Buffalo Late Night last year. We did it on the stadium survey that was sent out, and in that survey, it actually spoke on my seats, which are on it's section 108, which is about the 5 or 10 yard line. They're $7,500 a piece for the PSL, and then my season tickets would go up by $2,500. So that alone, right there, I don't know how many people have $30,000. I mean, Josh, we were talking before we went live. I've got a 5-month-old son. I don't even know if we're even in this, in this to possibly do this for the future, but I think people will be okay.
They will, and you're right. Like, there's going to be some attrition on those season ticket holders, and quite honestly, the home viewing experience for the NFL has never been better. And I think people, in a lot of ways, are enticed to just stay home. And I'm not saying this to brag. I think this has become normal for a lot of people. My setup at home is I have multiple TVs in one room, so I can watch the Bills game. I can keep an eye on Red Zone. Maybe I'm throwing the Dolphins game on because it has playoff implications for the Bills. I'm not dealing with traffic in the bathroom. I'm not dealing with a crowd at a concession stand when I'm thirsty. I'm walking up to my fridge to get it during a commercial break. And, I went to a game last year in Detroit. I live in the St. Louis area, for those that don't know. So I don't have the option to really go to every Bills game. And it was great. But, that's kind of for me, like that itch was scratched going to one game. I don't know personally that even if I lived next door to the stadium, that I would have the appetite to go to every game, because as much as I love to be there and experience Bills football, there's a part of me that feels like I miss out on the rest of the league. So I do think that there will be some attrition from that number coming down, particularly with the prices going up when you start talking about PSLs.
Yeah, I think, to be honest with you, like I said, I think people are going to be fine if you want to get seats. And they haven't even, here's the thing, we are still a number of years away from the stadium being here, and things are going to change. They literally put an allotment in building the stadium for, funds that are going to go to different changes that go along the way, changes in the blueprints, changes in things that they actually want to do. Part of that is going to be different things that they're going to add on. But one thing that they have mentioned is there is going to be party decks. So there are going to be tickets that you can buy on the game or the day of the game. It's just a standing room only, too. So that's an opportunity for a lot of fans to be able to get in at a lower price tag. So I think we are not in a bad situation. I think Bills fans will have a plethora of opportunity to go to these new games. The only thing is, realistically, that price tag is going to be significantly higher than they're used to.
Just the way it works. Prices are always going up. There's a lot of good that comes from having a good football team, and that football team realizes that one of the good things for them is they can keep jacking up the prices, and people will continue to pay it.
For sure. So let's go ahead. We're going to hear from our guy, one of the originators of Cover One, Greg Tomset, about one of our sponsors.
Hey guys, Cover One is excited to announce our new partnership with BetUS. BetUS has a live wagering on all major games, the best betting variety in the business, and an easy deposit and withdrawal process with the fastest payouts in the industry. Our loyal Cover One fans get a choice between two exclusive offers, either a 125% sign-up bonus on your first deposit up to $2,500 or a free $50 bet with no deposit required. Just use promo code COVER1 on the links provided in the show description below. BetUS, where the game begins.
Thank you, Greg, for your intimate words about betting. If you guys have any betting interest, check out BetUS. Use Cover One as your code. Get some money back. A lot of stuff going on right now. And in fact, speaking of betting, Ian, go ahead and hit the damn segment. Damn! Ladies and gentlemen, that is our intro for our damn segment. Tonight, this week's damn award recipient keeps in theme with some recent awardees as their gambling activity has earned them some time off from the league. Isaiah Rodgers has found himself in some hot water as he has violated the NFL's gambling policy and received a 1-year suspension for placing nearly 100 bets through sportsbook apps using a name of a personal associate. Notably, Mr. Rodgers placed bets on Colts games, Colts players in games he participated in, not only a brazen violation of the NFL gambling policy, but also one of the dumbest possible things you could do, considering the historical provenance of what happens when you bet on games you play in. Even if you had no idea of the actual rules surrounding gambling in the NFL, just Googling Pete Rose should be more than enough to dissuade you from doing that. Rodgers isn't the only one or only player to have gotten himself in trouble, however, as his teammate Rashad Berry also managed to catch a year-long suspension for gambling on games during the 2022 season. It's almost like they could have seen this coming and what happened to Calvin Ridley, and considered that they almost may face similar problems. So, for brazenly ignoring consequences that were plastered across the news last year and sending it anyway, we applaud Isaiah Rodgers and Rashad Berry for their Olympic capability of not watching the news and award them this week's damn trophy. So there we are for the damn award segment. Josh, speaking on this, what is your feeling on the current situation with the betting, the suspensions, how the NFL has handled it, and what you expect going forward?
It's so frustrating, Thomas, because Isaiah Rodgers as a player, I tweeted about this today from our Twitter account, reminded me a lot of Terrence McGee, where he came into the league, electric kick returner, really good athlete. If you remember back to the Colts-Bills playoff game, he actually had an interception in the end zone that ended up hitting the ground on replay, but that could have really turned the game. And to throw it all away over a bet, it's so stupid. It's so frustrating. And I understand the pushback of, wait a minute, we've seen guys get away with domestic violence, and we've seen guys get away with gun violence, and all those conversations are absolutely true. But you know the rules. You can get mad about what the rules are, but like Thomas said, it's point blank, period. Do not bet on sports, particularly your sport, particularly the team you play for. And they broke the rules. It's amazing that we're still having this conversation in 2023. And unfortunately, I feel like Isaiah Rodgers threw away his career today, and that cost him infinitely more money than he ever standed to win in whatever bet he made.
Yeah, that's the one thing that never really kind of jogged in my memory or my mind at all. The fact that this guy would bet, and unless you're a high roller in Vegas, whatever you're making on whatever app you're betting on, you're never going to see it kicked back to you. And likely it was a terrible bet in the first place, and people even speculated that it had something to do with a potential ex-Bills running back. Which is ridiculous in and of itself, because why would you bet on that guy? Because he's really just not good. Needless to say, the whole thing, when it comes to betting on sports, you already know, and like you were saying, Josh, with what's going on with domestic violence, I mean, we're talking about the Tyreek Hill situation, which we talked about in last week's episode. obviously that whole situation is still going on and potentially could be even more than what we thought. Um, the NFL cares about, and I tweeted this out the other day, the NFL cares more about the integrity of the game than the integrity of its players. Period. That's it. And when it comes to this, and I get it, I mean, at the end of the day, and Bruce Nolan said this, their bottom line is the most important piece to the NFL. And I mean, most businesses that is in fact the case. But when it comes to the NFL and betting, they already are in the limelight and are scrutinized when it comes to reffing, questionable calls, the integrity of the game based on cheating. There's so many things and a litany of issues that they've run into. The last thing they need to worry about is players betting on their own games and potentially questioning whether or not they're getting fixed. So the whole situation is ridiculous. I think it's great. I think what the NFL is doing is smart. I think the ban hammer is the thing you need to do in these situations, because if the players don't believe you, and you've seen that's why domestic violence stuff has been going on, it's prevailing, is because they've never actually laid the ban hammer on them. If they did that in those situations like they do now with this, you would see less and less of these nefarious activities happening. But you haven't, and they continue to prevail. So
I was naive. I thought the Calvin Ridley situation would snap everybody out of it, because I thought he was the one that was going to take one for the team essentially and be the example that was made out of it, because his suspension was strong. He lost a year of his career and ended up losing his spot on that team. And that was a first round pick, a notable player, a guy that had a chance and still has a chance to be a star in the league. And then sure enough, Jameson Williams, same exact situation, first round pick, wide receiver, chance to be a star in the league, comes around and does it too. So I don't know what it's going to take to make these guys learn, but I sure hope they get over it, because Isaiah Rodgers is a really talented player that we'll probably never see on the football field again. And that's a shame for everybody involved, particularly him.
yeah, he's already been waived. His teammate has already been waived as well. So it's an unfortunate situation. Potentially if they are reinstated after a year, maybe they'll get another opportunity. I don't know. I mean, this whole thing is just very disheartening in and of itself. But that being said, before we get into the main topic for tonight, I did mention this to you in private. We are going to quickly touch on the Jordan Poyer situation. Obviously, I know it is quite touchy for a lot of people, but that's fine. I'm okay with said situation. Lately, people have seen that Jordan Poyer, who has a golf charity event every year, or at least for a couple years, has canceled said event because that event was at the Big Blue Monster at Doral, which is Donald Trump's golf course. He received very quick backlash, and one of his major sponsors dropped out. Multiple teams dropped out. And then he went to Instagram defending his actions, defending why he believed it was ridiculous, and then even went as far to speak in an article, which I believe was The Athletic, stating why he didn't think it was a good, it was good that they were going after him for this, and how he was standing behind it and he was going to stand up for this whole situation. So, Josh, what is your perspective on this? What is your perspective on the Jordan Poyer situation with this golf tournament? You can be as forthright or as coy as you feel necessary in these type of waters.
No comment, Thomas. No, I'm just kidding. I wouldn't do that to you. It's a tricky situation. For one, I will say I am a very biased Jordan Poyer fan as a person. When you look at who he is as an all-pro football player, a high-level athlete, he has, from the outside looking in, for as much as he wants to give us visibility to his life, this is a person that has as much going for him as any of us could ever want. He's a multimillionaire. He excels at his sport. He has a model wife. Like, he's a great looking dude that can probably be a model when he's done playing. He's been drafted in 2 leagues as a professional athlete. And he took the walls down a couple years back and let us all know about his battle with alcoholism. And to me, that was such a heroic move for a player like that, because he didn't have to do that. We could have all just kept going on thinking that Jordan Poyer is this invincible person, and we just wish we could be him. And in a lot of ways he is, but him doing that helped out so many people that we never, ever will even see the benefit of. And you hear stories, I'm sure you've heard it too, Thomas, of Jordan Poyer answering DMs from strangers who message him and just say, Thank you. I'm battling this too. And if you see Jordan Poyer going through this, maybe I can get through this. He's answered DMs to help people, give them advice, a top-notch person. So I have a hard time going against him in this. I will say it's 2023, and whether you like it or not, we live in a very politically driven society. And in a lot of ways, it's kind of like team sports. It's either you're with us or against us. And right now, Trump is a buzzword on the conservative side. We will not get into why. I'm sure many of you know this, but given the history of, I think the PGA pulled out of a Trump event at one point in time, shortly after the January issue. This is not the first time that businesses have pulled out. And unfortunately for Jordan Poyer and for the charity and for the money that was going to be raised for ECMC, which I think we can all agree, we would rather see that money go to charity than not. Businesses also have the ability to make a choice. And if they don't want their name tied to something that they view as polarizing, they have the choice to do that. The last thing I'll say on this is Jordan Poyer's wife, Rachel Bush, is a very outspoken conservative. I know she rubs a lot of people the wrong way. And I know she had some comments about this afterward. I don't know how much that helped the situation, quite honestly. I think the overall arching point I have on this is it's a shame that something that was going to benefit a very important charity that is for career success for underserved populations. I think it was a fitness center. It's not going to be there, but it's not overly shocking. And I think the people that pulled out, I understand why they did it. And that's kind of where I want to leave it, because I don't want to say which side I agree with too much, but I understand both sides. I do understand Jordan Poyer's frustration, but overall, it's not surprising.
Right. So with Jordan, I align with him. Obviously, I'm a Bills fan. So him being a Bills player, what he's done for Buffalo, how he puts his body on the line. You saw last year, the guy was held together by bubble gum and popsicle sticks. I mean, the guy fought through everything. I will never speak badly about a guy who does all of that. His battle with alcohol. I am now 2 years sober myself. And that was a hard thing to go through. I quit smoking and drinking about 2 weeks apart from each other. And I've now been free of both for almost 2 years. So that battle and him being so honest is incredible, because a guy like that, like you said, can truly give people the ability or the feeling that they can accomplish anything. If a guy like him can, they can as well. The one thing though on the other side, and right, like I don't want to show one side or the other. I think it's all kind of just ridiculous in and of itself. How he couldn't see going into this, having a tournament with a guy like Donald Trump, who is banned in New York State for engaging in charitable activities because his organization took from a charity, a cancer charity, to go for his election bid in a time period where Donald Trump is presently trying to start gaining traction for an election bid, was probably not the smartest move. The foresight, Aaron Quinn has said this himself. His PR team should have been cognizant enough to know that it just wasn't a great idea, personally, because the optics of all this were just never going to be good. What Donald Trump brings to the table. The divisiveness that he is behind him, and the prevailing factor of that. I think him doing a charity golf tournament is amazing. There's like 50 golf courses within a 30-mile radius of Miami that he could have chosen. He picked one for a reason. It is what it is. It's a weird hill to die on, but it is what it is. I think, people will still respect Jordan Poyer at the end of the day. Unfortunately, nowadays, because of the world we live in, with the intimacy of social media, the bridge or the gap that is now bridged between politics and social media and everyday life and sports is narrowed to a razor thin margin. And so that, unfortunately, because of it, puts these players in a very precarious position where, unfortunately, their feelings, their sentiments, how they perceive their life, or how they want to act is now open for public scrutiny. So it is what it is. It's an unfortunate situation, but when you do that, That's what you're going to do. Also, thank you for everybody with the kind words. For my sobriety. It's the best thing I've ever done. If you are struggling, and I'll say this real quick. This is a great little segue before we get into tonight's thing. If you are struggling with whether it's drugs or alcohol or nicotine or whatever it is that you might be struggling with, there is help out there. There is programs. There is different things you can do. Get the help you need. I promise you, it is awesome. And if you quit drinking, you don't have to. But if you do, you sleep better. I promise you, I've never slept better in my life than when I stopped drinking. That being said, let's get into the good stuff because I'm done with all that nonsense. Tonight's conversation with Josh is going to be about the Buffalo Bills schedule. We are going to go week by week. We are going to talk about each matchup, what we think about the opponent, and really kind of where they stand. And then what we're going to do alongside that is we are going to give our perspective, our predictions, and what we think the Bills are going to do. So let's get right into this. Josh, week one, we have the New York Jets, Aaron Rodgers, and a very, very vocal New York Jets fandom in Jersey, East Rutherford. What is your feeling on the New York Jets going into the season? What's your feeling on what they've done? Them coming off of the heels of a more successful season than people thought, a really nice draft. What's your feeling on the New York Jets in week one?
It's hard not to like what they've done this offseason because they already had the defense in place. And I think those of us that have been watching them closely kind of figured they had the skill position players in place. Like Breece Hall was going to be the offensive rookie of the year before he got hurt. And then their wide receiver, Garrett Wilson, won offensive rookie of the year. And they addressed the most important position in the sport. I don't think Aaron Rodgers is at the tippy top of the quarterbacks in the league. But when you go from somebody who was probably at the bottom of the starting spectrum to somebody who at least is in the top third with Aaron Rodgers, you're going to feel that. I don't love the landing spot of this game on the schedule because I think this is going to be a tough spot for any team to walk into. When Tom Brady left the division after the 2019 season, you notice the Bills and Dolphins got right pretty quick, and they were able to get their revenge on New England for the 2 decades of pain. The Jets have not had that opportunity yet. Despite Tom Brady being gone, the Patriots have still smacked them around. I thought it made all the sense in the world to put the Patriots in this spot, give the fans a chance to get New England Patriots blood on their hands, Aaron Rodgers first start, whatever. That's going to be a very fired up crowd. Very similar, I think, to what the Miami crowd was like week 3 last year, where it felt like when Miami beat Buffalo, that was their Super Bowl. In general, with this matchup, there were only 3 teams that held the Bills to 21 points or less last season in the regular season, and 2 of them were the Jets games. So their defense, we know, is ready to go. I get the sense that Breece Hall probably is not going to play in that game, so that's where timing could benefit the Bills on this. You have their best offensive lineman, Elijah Vera Tucker, working his way back from an ACL injury that he suffered in October. So again, that's a ramp-up period. I think in general, it's better to catch the Jets early, even though I worry about the week 1 spot because you talk about chemistry, Aaron Rodgers learning the playbook. They're going to have Joe Tippmann starting at center, which I love him as a prospect, but a rookie center right out of the gate. I think that's a chance for Ed Oliver and Poona Ford and Daquan Jones to really have a strong game. So I think the Jets are a team that should ascend as the season goes on. I don't know that we'll see the best version of them week 1, but the fact that it is Aaron Rodgers' first time playing in front of that crowd in that uniform, I think there's a chance for the Jets to have some early momentum in that game. If the Bills can weather that storm, I think they'll be okay.
Right. This is going to be a litmus test for both. I think it's going to be a big game for the Jets. A lot of people are talking about the Jets as being a potential playoff Super Bowl contender, a team that, Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh pushed all their chips into the center of the table and said, let's do this right now. Brought in a lot of guys that were Aaron Rodgers buddies. Randall Cobb, Alan Lazard, guys that made him feel comfortable. They already have a ton of talent on that roster, but this is a real big test. They're going against a Bills team that I personally think markedly got better, not just in little areas. Across the board, the Bills roster is better than it was last year. And it's the best roster that Brandon Beane has put on, not only on paper, but on the field thus far in his career with Buffalo. I think if you look at who this Jets team is, yes, they have some unbelievable talent. Like you said, Brees Hall, will he be back? Who knows? Garrett Wilson, he should be even better this year. That's a big question mark. The big one for me is Sauce Gardner. Sauce Gardner was made into this titan last year, a guy that people fear. They say he could be the best corner in the NFL. He also got away with a lot. He got a lot of wiggle room and a long leash to get away with a lot of things that more often than not most corners can't get away with. I think he is a uber talented corner that coming this season they're going to press as much as possible. He showed his weaknesses at times, and other times he just didn't get tested. I think in general, Josh is going to go into this game and feel that he can truly take it to this team because now he's going to be fully healthy. And on top of that, the one thing that isn't spoken about that I think needs to be is the Bills receiving core outside of Diggs was quite underwhelming. Gabe Davis did not live up to expectation last year. Even if his stats said one thing, he just wasn't what everybody anticipated. They had no slot receiver as McKenzie was completely dysfunctional when given the opportunity to really excel. Jamison Crowder wasn't even around when they were playing the Jets. Dawson Knox was spending more time blocking for Spencer Brown. So when you're talking about the fact that they shut us down, well, it's not hard to shut down when you're really only having to worry about one wide receiver and the rest is just kind of middling. That's not going to be the case this year. They have added a plethora of very talented options. And I think it's going to be a matchup that he's not going, Sauce Gardner or DJ Reed or their very underwhelming safety tandem are going to be able to do a lot. And they already lost Chuck Clark for the season. Whitehead is not that impressive. And obviously they brought in a very aging safety. His name is blanking my mind right now.
Was it Amos? Is that who they brought in?
Adrian Amos. Yeah. Yep. The Jets have a great roster. They have a lot of things going on. That offensive line is a huge question mark.
Mm-hmm.
If Mekhi Becton can even stay healthy, we don't know what Elijah Vera Tucker is. And then outside of that, it's a crapshoot. And we saw when Aaron Rodgers has a bad offensive line, shit tends to go rolling downhill quick. So I think this is a matchup that very easily the Bills could come out as a team that is formidable, that has played together for a long time and just added talent, could walk the Jets early because the Jets are still working through some kinks. And Aaron Rodgers is the type of quarterback who typically doesn't play great week one. So let's move on to week two. Week two, we are at the home opener in Highmark Stadium against the potentially Jimmy Garoppolo led, who knows who their quarterback is, Las Vegas Raiders.
This team's a mess. This is a win that the Bills have to get to the win column. They had a mediocre offensive line last year and decided to run it back in free agency. Their only free agent addition to their offensive line was Greg Van Roten. So Bills fans can just kind of think about that one for a second. There's no certainty that Josh Jacobs will be there in week two. This franchise tag holdout situation sounds like it could get ugly. There's rumblings they could trade Hunter Renfrow. They did add Jacoby Myers in the offseason. Devontae Adams has voiced displeasure about moving on from Carr. We'll see what that happens. I assume he'll be there. They traded Darren Waller this offseason. They don't have a lot of playmakers, a bad offensive line, and you could be looking at Brian Hoyer being the starting quarterback if Jimmy Garoppolo can't go. Brian Hoyer in 2023 could start an NFL football game in Buffalo's home opener. Now, I'm not going to give them no shot because they do come with a defense that has Chandler Jones and Max Crosby and the rookie Tyree Wilson off the edge. And I do think that as we go through this schedule, Thomas, that until Spencer Brown proves otherwise, the teams that are going to concern me the most are the ones that can bring edge heat on both sides. The Raiders can certainly do that. But looking at this roster from top to bottom, the injury concerns, the concerns with their premier players that they don't have a lot of anyway, this is not a game that concerns me. And I would be very concerned on Monday if the Bills don't get a win.
Yeah, the Raiders right now are a team that I think they thought bringing in Jimmy Garoppolo was a potential bridge move. We saw last year when they, again, went all in with Derek Carr, only just on the heels of giving a massive contract extension, then just 1 year later, sending him packing. This team can't figure out its head from its toes. There's a lot of question marks. Obviously, Devontae Adams is uber talented. Max Crosby is unbelievable. I think Chandler Jones had a drop off last year in terms of what his expectancy was. He's still very talented. I don't know if he's as talented as he once was when he played with the Cardinals. Um, I think the Raiders, it should be a game when you're coming into Buffalo. The crowd is always raucous. You know, the home opener is an environment that is unlike most. I think this is a game that the Bills should go in there and put its best foot forward, especially if you're coming off of a big matchup against the New York Jets. If they win week one, that crowd at Highmark Stadium is going to be, I mean, ripe as all get out. I think this is a big time win for them and an opportunity to continue moving forward into a week 3 matchup against the Sam Howell led Washington Commanders, a team that, for some reason, people keep thinking could be a darling dark horse. I don't get it.
Yeah, I don't get it either. I think the Commanders to me, I almost said the other name, so I had to catch myself. The Commanders to me kind of resemble the drought Bills, where you look at their roster and you're like, there's some good pieces on defense. I can work with that. Oh, there's some receivers that if they only had a quarterback, they could do some damage. But who's the quarterback? Sam Howell. Who's that guy? Like that's the drought Bills. It's like, oh, Lee Evans and Terrell Owens are great, but Trent Edwards is going to throw them the ball. That's not going to work. The Bills can't lose to a team quarterbacked by Sam Howell or Jacoby Brissett. Whoever wins that battle, they should not lose that game. Their offensive line was bad last year. They will have 4 new starters this year, including a rookie center and Ricky Stromberg. Their defensive line is deep. Montez Sweat, Deron Payne, Jonathan Allen, Chase Young. They can rotate in waves and they can cause some trouble for the Bills up front, particularly if they keep it close early and keep the crowd into it. I would rather play this team later in the year because this feels like a team where the season could go off the rails. Ron Rivera going into the 4th year. He's very much on the hot seat in my brain. New ownership. It seems like that they prevented them from drafting a quarterback this year, and they kind of want to hit the reset button next year, barring a miraculous turnaround that nobody really sees coming. So I think by November or December, the Commanders could be donating games to people with a complete lack of interest in a half-filled stadium. That's not going to be the case in week 3, but this is a game that if the Bills are who we think they are, they have to find a way to get it to the win column.
Yeah, and now that we know that Sean McDermott's going to be calling the defensive game plan, Sean McDermott back to Carolina was known to be pressure-packed. A lot of blitzes, even using four-man fronts, but also sending his linebackers and his safeties and his corners really coming from all different directions. You're going against a guy like Sam Howell, who will be in his first year, truly going into he's going to be the guy. You know that Sean McDermott is going to find every which way to make that guy's day as difficult and as confusing as possible. The Bills have what should be a very talented secondary with Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer back together, Tre'Davious White fully healthy, and then whomever decides to be cornerback 2, whoever decides they want to step up. I think this is a matchup for the Bills where unless Sam Howell shows early that he is as good as some people perceive him to be, I don't see it. This should be a very easy day at the office. The last time they played the Redskins, it was a cakewalk. They literally trounced them. I think this is the type of situation that the Bills could have another easy statistical day where they could pad their stats and maybe see Josh Allen sitting on the bench going into the 4th quarter. I love like what you said. I think the Washington I keep going with the Redskins. The Commanders have a ton of talent. Scary Terry is one of my NFL crushes outside of Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think those two are so talented, so difficult to match up against. What they can actually present when they're standing up against the line is something that most receivers can't do. And like you said, that defensive line is crazy talented. They re-signed Deron Payne to a big time contract. I mean, you saw Tim Settle got out of there because he just couldn't get from out underneath all that talent. I'm honestly surprised Matt Ioannidis is not staying there. I thought he really was not, struggling as much as apparently they perceived him to be. But then again, they also got rid of Settle, and Settle was underwhelming for us. So maybe they know something we don't. I agree, though. I think, this is a matchup the Bills should and will win. then we are heading into a very intriguing matchup. A matchup 1 week later than it was last year, but it is in Buffalo, which for Bills fans who traveled down to South Beach and Bills players who struggled through abysmal warm weather in Miami, we are playing the Dolphins on October 1st, week 4, 1 p.m. In a very, very I don't even know how you say this matchup because it's really all depending on what happens with Tua and if he can stay healthy. I know people don't like to hear that, but it's factually correct. This is a matchup that is potentially two powerhouses of the AFC. Josh, how do you see this matchup? What do you think about the Dolphins?
So it's interesting where you left off with Tua, because I think a lot of Dolphins fans will come into your mentions and take that as an insult, but it's really a compliment, because if Tua was a mediocre quarterback, it wouldn't really matter if it were Tua or Mike White. What we're saying is, because I will co-sign what you're saying, is if Tua's healthy, I think he proved last year he's a very good quarterback, especially with those weapons around him, especially with Mike McDaniel calling plays, who I think is a high level play caller. The drop off from where I think Tua is, which is in that top 10 conversation, to Mike White, who is in that 30 to 40 conversation, is big enough to take them down the pecking order. And that's to me the story of almost their entire team, because it's not just Tua. You look at Teron Armstead, he's a guy that piles up the injuries. Bradley Chubb is a guy that can't stay healthy. Xavier Howard dealt with 2 groin injuries last year. Now he played through it. That is super impressive. That's like Jordan Poyer-esque for the Dolphins. I can't imagine doing that. Brandon Jones, their safety, had season-ending injury. Jalen Phillips has managed to stay healthy so far through his NFL career, but that's a guy that just had injuries all over his college career. So it almost feels like a ticking time bomb of a roster where on paper, it's intimidating. I think 1-53 when healthy, the Dolphins are on par with the Bills, and that's where Josh Allen has to be the difference maker over Tua. And last year, all 3 games were close. Now, the playoff game was a mirage. The Bills outgained the Dolphins by almost double the yardage. There were interceptions that got returned back into scoring territory. There was kick returns that got back to scoring territory. There was a defensive touchdown. That game was not as close as the final score. The Bills should have won that game by more. I'm not making excuses, but in general, the 2 regular season games were close. I expect these regular season games to be close. And if healthy, the Dolphins are a team that should scare Bills fans. And I think you would need to brace for a tough Sunday.
Yeah, just like I had said just before that, Tua's health is something that's of question. And the other thing that we got to talk about is Tyreek Hill. Do I think the NFL is going to hand down a suspension? Probably not. Do I think it'd be anything of length? Probably not. But that is something to obviously keep note, because if Tyreek Hill is not on the field, that is a massive loss to a very, very talented Dolphins offense. Obviously, you're still waiting to hear about Dalvin Cook. The speculation is that he could end up down in South Beach. I think the Dolphins are incredibly talented, but I am not as convinced. I don't think this is the type of matchup that the Bills need to be as nearly. I think they're talented. I don't think they'd be nearly as worried. You saw the matchup week 3. The Bills had any type of defense, any type, they would have won that game. And they even still held them to 21. Josh Allen just was outside of himself, couldn't get anything going, really had no slot help whatsoever. The offensive line was putrid and could not hold up for even a couple seconds. I think if you have a team that, as we've spoken in the intro of this show, that is significantly more talented, they should be able to hold their own against a Dolphins team who, outside of Jalen Ramsey, who is overrated in my opinion, did not get markedly better. They added the same running backs back to their running back room, really didn't add a ton in their wide receiver room, and then lost Trent Sherfield, who people honestly need to look at and realize he was very beneficial to that team, provided blocking for those wide receivers, and had the 3rd most yards for that team behind, their 2 vaunted, very talented receivers. I think the Bills are a team that pound for pound can match up with anybody, and a Dolphins team that I think needs everything to go right, lesser than the fact that they are as much of a titan as people perceive them to be. I think this is a match that the Bills win. I think later in the season when we go into Miami, then we can question and take a look at that. I think you're heading into London to go against the Jacksonville Jaguars playing in Tottenham Stadium, the model of the new stadium, and a matchup of Trevor Lawrence, the ascension of Sunshine, and what he can be. Josh, what are your thoughts on Trevor Lawrence, Doug Peterson, and that really new, just stellar Jaguars team of the future?
This is where I'm going to come off as a hater. And I think Jaguars fans should be excited. They have some young talent that took a step last year under Doug Peterson. How could you not take a step after going from Urban Meyer to Doug Peterson? I know Urban Meyer beat the Bills. I get it. But I think when you look under the hood of what the Jaguars actually accomplished last year, I think it's time to pour some water on this idea that they have somehow ascended up to where the Bills and the Bengals and the Chiefs currently sit in this conference, because I think that's how the conversation is sounding, because they were among the Final Four last year. They were a 9-8 football team. Week 18, they beat Josh Dobbs and the Tennessee Titans at home by 4 points to make the playoffs, and they needed a fumble return in the fourth quarter to get that lead. In the playoffs, they beat the Chargers. They came back from 27 points down. Lost in that emotional win is, how in the heck did you get down 27-0 in your first home playoff game since 2017? And then they go to Kansas City the next week and they lose to the Chiefs by a touchdown, which on paper, hey, it's like golf clap. You hung with the Chiefs in Arrowhead. I mean, the Bills could write a book about how cool it is to hang with the Chiefs in the playoffs, but Patrick Mahomes got injured early in that game and he couldn't even plant his throwing foot. They brought in Chad Henne, and there was a real discussion of, does Chad Henne give them a better chance to win this game than Patrick Mahomes? And you got to find a way to win that game. That is a gift from the football gods, not to call an injury a gift, but you get what I'm saying. And I look at this team, and their offensive line was ranked 27th in a PFF article that came out a couple weeks ago. They lost their best offensive lineman, Jawan Taylor, to Kansas City. They drafted Antoine Harrison. I don't know if you can expect him to be an upgrade as a rookie. There's a situation going on with Cam Robinson, their best offensive tackle now. He's going to miss the first 4 games. That won't impact the Bills. Josh, you look at their draft history, it's up and down. Josh Allen looked like a star coming into the league, and then he's kind of tailed off, and he's kind of just settled out at like a pretty decent player, but not a take over the game kind of player. So I don't know. I'm not buying the hype like a lot of people are. I think they'll win their division by default, because the Colts and the Texans, to me, are both still kind of a year or two away from being back to where they want to get to. Maybe the Titans put up a fight if Tannehill and Henry can stay healthy. But I think they'll be in the playoffs, but this is not a team that I fear nearly as much as some other teams on the schedule.
Yeah, I think they've got some really nice weapons. I think Doug Peterson's a great coach. And how he was able to coach up that team was really nice. Obviously, you couldn't do any worse than Urban Meyer. Trevor Lawrence has been fantastic all the way since his days back at Clemson. And even if you go back even further with Justin Fields and him on the Elite 11, they were very, very talented. The two of them, they've been the measuring stick when it comes to watching quarterbacks and how they've kind of just their maturation process and whatnot. I like the weapons. I like what they have there in Jacksonville. I think Travis Etienne is super, super exciting to watch. He can provide an element, kind of very similar to Breece Hall. I agree, though. I think when it comes down to it, I think the Bills in totality are supremely talented against them. It's going to come down to, if Josh Allen can score, the Bills win that game. If Josh Allen cannot put it together, then they're going to run into issues. This is considered a primetime game. Josh Allen is historically the best primetime quarterback in NFL history, which is an insane stat considering the length of Josh Allen's very, very, very youthful career thus far. I think this is a matchup going into it that the Bills are going to be excited. I think people are mentioning, and I know people have said Jaguars are going to be in London before this. I'm not super concerned about that. It's already proven that, you can go over the night before, get there, play, and have next to no lag, no layover, no issues like that. I think the Bills will be fine. I think they're going to go in and they're going to put up a really nice fight against a Jaguars team that is still growing and maturing. The Bills should be 5-0. going back home to play against Brian Dable and the New York Giants?
We're going to learn a lot about the human body in this game, Thomas, because the Bills elected not to take their bye week after their London trip. And we're going to see if this jet lag thing does impact them coming back to play the Giants. I like the Giants. I like a lot of what they're building. And I think they were honest with themselves this offseason, because I thought, having made the playoffs last year, first year under Joe Shane and Daboll, that maybe they'd go out and swing big for a receiver. And I was surprised they weren't in on DeAndre Hopkins, but they slow played it. They really put together a team of a bunch of slot receivers: Jalen Hyatt, Paris Campbell, Isaiah Hodgins, who Bills fans know pretty well. Sterling Shepard came back, Jamison Crowder. I mean, it's just like Bills Central over there. But I don't know on paper that this team is ready to really punch with the Bills. I think Brian Dable's a good enough coach that he can keep the game close, and maybe they have a shot to win late. This feels like a everything you can do, we can do better situation, not to sound arrogant. Like Daniel Jones is he ascended last year. He's a fun mobile quarterback that can extend plays. Josh Allen might be the best in the sport at that. So we'll see. Brian Dable obviously knows the defense. He'll obviously be very motivated to come in and win that game. And they do, like some other teams we talked about, have a very strong defensive line. You look at Dexter Lawrence, who might be the best nose tackle in the entire sport. Kayvon Thibodeau is a guy who was drafted very highly last year, came on in the second half of the season and really started to look like a guy that's going to make the Jaguars regret who they picked ahead of him as the season went on. A lot of it will depend on how quickly Deonte Banks can hit the ground running. I expect him to start opposite Adoree Jackson. And, if he struggles, watch out against a team like the Bills, because they're certainly going to find him and test him in that game. We'll see what happens with Saquon Barkley's franchise tag situation. I would bet that he's in uniform for that game. But overall, their offensive line, big concern, 29th ranked by PFF. Evan Neal, their high round pick last year, was really a disappointment. I think they're expecting him to take a step this year. They should be starting a rookie center in John Michael Schmitz. We're about 6 or 7 games into the season, so maybe he's not a rookie anymore at that point, but there's enough reasons to be concerned. I think the Giants can keep it close, but I think the Bills ultimately will win this game.
Yeah, it's going to be a game of how well do you know your opponent. And obviously with these two, there's a lot of coaches on both coaching staff that know each other very, very well. Obviously, Joe Shane, Brandon Beane, not that they have anything to do with the game day experience, know each other very well. And then the rosters are very mirrored, like you said. I think there's a lot of things that, the Bills can sit there and say, we know what they're going to do. The Saquon Barkley thing doesn't necessarily scare me. We've seen the Bills have handled, a stout running attack. We've played Derrick Henry outside of holding calls that don't get called. We've held him in check for more often than not. I think this is a game that when you look at the way the Giants play, I think what they were able to do last year was more so playing with emotion, playing with heart, and being able to get that team to play beyond what I think most people expected. I think Brian Dable is a motivator of men. He is a player's coach, a guy that, Josh Allen loved because he kept him in check, but also loved him because he was like a father figure to him. I think there's some great things, like you said, that the Giants do well. But if you look at their roster, it's not as talented as the Bills. And I always like to go back but that's just the fact of the reality of the situation, that the Bills roster is one of, if not the most talented in the NFL. The Giants are on their way. They're not there yet. They are like the first stop on that old map quest, that first little bulletin. That's where the Giants are presently on their trip to succession. I think down the road, they could be a very, very fun team to watch. I don't think they're there yet. I think the Bills should easily take this victory, especially in a Sunday night matchup in Highmark Stadium. It's going to start getting a little chilly at that point. I think it'll be fun to watch. We're going to be moving into week 7 against the New England Patriots, a team that, quite frankly, I think has a lot more problems than they have positivity. Josh, your thoughts?
Well, for one, I think Mac Jones is going to be much better off with Bill O'Brien over Matt Patricia. His numbers just sank last year under Patricia, and whatever they tried to get accomplished with that offensive coordinator by committee situation. Mac Jones looked like he was on his way to being a very good quarterback year one, 3,800 yards, 22 touchdowns, 92.5 quarterback rating. Last year, less than 3,000 yards, only 14 touchdowns, benched at times for Bailey Zappi, 11 interceptions. So we'll see where he kind of settles in. I think he probably is somebody who's going to top out around maybe Kirk Cousins, which is fine, but it's always like that quarterback that in the back of your mind, you're trying to think, can we do better than him? Is he good enough to go toe to toe with the Allens, the Mahomes, the Burrows? That's what I think his ceiling is, particularly with the cast of characters they have around him. I don't see a real star in their receiving core. Juju Smith-Schuster to me is not an upgrade over Jacoby Myers. Devontae Parker always plays well against the Bills, but at this point in time in his career, I think he's really just a guy. Mike Gesicki is interesting. I think him and Hunter Henry can cause some intriguing problems for defenses. I think Mike Gesicki is a guy that was underutilized in Miami. He's not going to block a lick, but I don't think they're going to ask him to do that. He's going to be a big slot, probably much in the way that Dalton Kincaid is going to be for the Bills. So I at least am intrigued by that. Stevenson's a nice running back, but overall, Thomas, my issue with this team, maybe outside of Matthew Judon, is when you look up and down this roster, I don't see one great player. I see good players. Kyle Duggar is a fun joker on defense that can be a safety, a linebacker. He's fun. Christian Barmore has had some moments in this league where he looks really good. I love their draft of Christian Gonzalez. We'll see what he amounts to. But in general, you look at this roster, no great players besides Duggar. The roster is not as good as the Bills. The Bills have a huge advantage at quarterback. So it's a game and an opponent to me that the Bills have to find 2 wins against this season if they're going to get to where they want to get to, because right now the Patriots are just not in a form where they should be able to punch with the Bills.
Yeah, and I mean, you even saw in Mac Jones' best season, they got ran over. They got taken to church. A game where Bill Belichick, who is known for his defensive prowess, was unable to do much of anything and hasn't been able to do much of anything against Josh Allen. Like you said, and I've said this a couple different times, the Patriots are a just above to good average roster without any superstars. Matthew Judon's great, not very good at recruiting, but he is a fantastic defensive end, do some fun things. But outside of that, their roster is just so. It's nothing special. They don't have Dante Scarnecchia anymore to really kind of take that offensive line to the next level. And Bill Belichick has kind of unfortunately shown his warts without Tom Brady. I think that team used to be good because of Tom Brady. They're just going to be the team that they are. I like your analogy with Kirk Cousins. I actually, ironically enough, said something very similar today, that Kirk Cousins is the guy that he's like a step stool. You know exactly as high as you're going to be able to get with that step stool. You know, you can reach certain things, but that's really the limitations. That's what Kirk Cousins, and I think, unfortunately, that's what Mac Jones is. He's a guy that is just, this is your benchmark. Don't expect much more, but maybe don't expect a ton less. He's just a guy. Mac Jones showed at times he could do really well, but he also showed in that win game when Josh Allen was still throwing the ball that his limitations are exactly what they are, limitations. The Bills are going to be, in my mind, coming on a stretch of very big victories. Even if they don't go 6-0 going to this game, I expect probably 4-2, 5-1 at very, very minimum, coming into a game where they should take the New England Patriots and show them that they are still the number 1 team in the AFC East. I think this is a big time victory and another notch for the Bills to continue their prowess to winning the division and eventually getting themselves back into the AFC Championship picture. We are going to be moving to the Tampa Bay Bucks with who knows at quarterback. Is it Baker Mayfield? Is Jameson Winston on that team? I don't know what's going on.
Kyle Trask is the other guy. Yeah.
Kyle Trask.
Yeah.
Okay. That's how little I know about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers anymore. I know that they've still got a litany of very talented receivers. I think that this team is fun. I think they can do things. I think they're on the very end of the back nine of their success and rode Tom Brady. I don't expect a lot from this team. I think Baker's a lot of fun. I think Baker's a quarterback that, unfortunately, coming out had a head full of steam, kind of like Johnny Football, a not so great coaching staff in Cleveland, and potentially is at a reclamation game type in Tampa Bay. What are your thoughts about this matchup?
I think this is the kind of game where, if you're at the gym and you're working out and you know that you have a really hard run coming up, you might want to do something easy before the run. So maybe you stretch. This is the Bills stretching before the really hard run, because after this game, it gets significantly harder for a handful of weeks. This is a pretty easy game. I'm with you. I think if Bruce Arians were still there as the head coach, I would give Baker Mayfield a fighting shot of succeeding, because he obviously had enough talent at one point in time to be the first overall pick in the draft. You can make excuses for what happened in Cleveland and be like, oh, they're a mess. And then obviously that compounded in Carolina. And then we saw some flashes under McVay. I guess one game is a flash now with the Rams. But overall, to me, this is kind of just the last remains of what once was a good thing. Bruce Arians isn't there anymore. Tom Brady's not there anymore. I think that offensive line is overrated. Tom Brady makes offensive lines look good. He has the quickest release in the sport. Tristan Wirfs is, I think, one of the best right tackles in the sport. They're moving him to left tackle. We'll see how that goes. They're going to have 3 new starters on their offensive line. They have some fun names. Vita Vea, Antoine Winfield Jr., Levante David came back. But Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are still there. Maybe not what they once were, but still intriguing offensive players. But in general, I think the biggest wild card in this game is it's a Thursday night game, and those can just be weird in general because there's not a lot of game planning that goes into Thursday night games. A lot of it really is just who's the better team, but that should all favor the Bills, who are at home playing an inferior team. And I think that the Bills should win this game. And I think the Buccaneers may be very similar to the Commanders, or a team that by the time the second half of the season hits, they could have an interim coach.
Right. And, like I was saying with Baker, this is a possibility for him to reignite that very just illustrious career coming out of Oklahoma, potentially making himself into the starter over in Tampa. And I'm sure if he does well, they might handcuff themselves to him. He's still very young. He's very talented. He presents himself as the new age quarterback with the ability to move around a bit, to scramble, has a cannon of an arm. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think Baker Mayfield's ship has sailed, unfortunately. I think, Mike Evans is perfect for him, obviously. I think what that offense presents for Baker is perfect. But again, I just don't know if that offensive scheme is going to work. And I just don't think Baker is the guy anymore. I agree at that point, going into that late in the season, being week 8, I think you kind of are going to know what Tampa is. You are going to know what Buffalo is. I think this is a big time win for the Bills heading into a very, very important matchup for the Buffalo Bills, the Cincinnati Bengals. We're going to kind of coast through these next couple games because we're already at an hour and 3 minutes into this episode. I think we all know exactly what the Cincinnati game is going to be. It's a juggernaut matchup, a game where 2 Titans are going to be facing. Potentially, if KC doesn't, continue its warpath, this could be the AFC Championship precursor. Josh, if you just want to give your prediction on this.
Yeah. So just in general on this game, and I won't be as long-winded on the rest of them, but this one I think is maybe the most important game of the season, because we all can talk for hours about what the Bills had working against them in both Bengals matchups, especially the playoff game where they were on E and they were down a bunch of defensive starters and they got run out of the building. And I think that the Bills probably know all that too, but it's time to now go prove that that's true. And can you play with this team? Because if the Bengals blow you out again, it's going to be hard to take those excuses seriously. I am living in a world where the Bills are on the Bengals level and can beat the Bengals at full health or relatively full health without all the distractions they had last year. But it's time to prove it. And this is going to be a game that I'm watching very closely. And I don't try to put too much weight in any one individual regular season game. But I think for the psyche of this team, where it's at on the NFL calendar, I think this is a very important game for the Bills, even if they don't win, to punch with the Bengals and just prove to themselves like this team is not 3 laps ahead of us. This team is on our level, and on our good day, we can beat them. And that's what I'll be looking for.
Yeah, I think with the Bengals, and we've seen it with Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow is a very, very talented quarterback. No doubts. No one's going to say anything different. But he's also shown in the playoffs and in the regular season that he is he's not unflappable. He's not a guy that doesn't come with his warts. He has been honestly very average to kind of below average when it comes to playoff time. Has shown that statistically he's just not that great in the big moments. But then a lot of times teams fall in their face and he just kind of gets that opportunity. You've seen other times where he played the New England Patriots, who shot themselves in the foot as many times as they could, and he gave them that game, and still they couldn't finish it off. I think that Bengals team is very, very talented. Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, one of the best 3 wide receiver tandems in NFL history. Who knows if they can keep the 3 together going forward? This is going to be a great matchup. I think people look at this in that matchup in the playoffs as a testament to who these 2 teams are. I don't. I think the Bills were less than an empty tank of gas. They were a team that was emotionally, physically weathered. They were a team that dealt with more than any NFL or sports team has ever dealt with in a 3-month span. I think this team comes back with a vengeance, with a fury, with a really unbridled passion. Knowing what they dealt with the DeMar Hamlin situation, playing in Cincinnati last year, and the matchup that came back into Buffalo. I think this is a big time victory for the Bills. I don't think they're going to be at this point 9-0. I think there's probably going to be a loss that I'm not accounting for, but I do think this is a matchup where the Bills, just like you said, are going to be going toe to toe, and Josh Allen's going to have something to prove here. We are heading into Denver. I think you and I can pretty much feel pretty comfortably saying that is a win against a Broncos team and Russ Wilson, who I just don't think he is what he once was.
I think he's washed. I think the hope there is maybe Sean Payton can unlock something that used to be, but there were even signs at the end of his Seattle career that he was going down the drain. So I think this is a Denver Broncos team that maybe even internally is already planning for life after Russ. Look at the way they're building their roster. I think Sean Payton's getting a lot of pieces in place to be good maybe 2 or 3 years from now when they can get Russell Wilson's contract off the books. And this will be kind of a painful year for them, but one that they're willing to go through to get where they ultimately want to get to.
The hope is, at least in Denver, that they plan for beyond Russell Wilson with Peyton, because otherwise Peyton is handcuffing himself and putting himself a real potential pickle, knowing that his legacy is handcuffed to Drew Brees. And if this goes bad, then it's just like Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, where the quarterback is the one that really levitated that entire career, not the other way around. So I think this is interesting. This is going to be a fun storyline to watch, to see how this kind of shakes out. If you've never been to Denver, by the way, my wife and I went last year. Go to Denver. It is a beautiful, beautiful place. Now, New York Jets in Buffalo. I think this is going to be a wild matchup. New Year's Eve, or excuse me, not New Year's Eve. I'm looking at the wrong column. November 19th, 4:25 in Buffalo. Josh, what are your thoughts?
It'll be interesting. I think the Jets will be in better form by now than they were early in the year. The game's in Buffalo. In a lot of ways, maybe this is for the stranglehold of the AFC East. I mean, who knows? Injuries could obviously dictate a lot of this. But I think this will be a prove-it game for both teams. I expect both these teams to be fairly close record-wise at this point in the season. And this game will go a long way to determining who gets the home game in the playoffs for winning the division. I still think the Bills are the better team overall. I think a lot of things have to go right for the Jets year one to get the full benefit of having Aaron Rodgers. But the potential is there. Like it's undeniable that that's a loaded roster. If things go right, they can certainly punch with the Bills.
Yeah, I think, like we started with this, I think this matchup is going to be very, very intriguing. At this point, you're going to know exactly who the Jets are. They're either going to be a stud, or they're going to be a complete and utter dud, and everything's going to come unglued and off the rails. I think this is truly going to be one of those Rex Ryan type of seasons where it could be potentially really magical, or a dumpster fire just sitting there waiting to get rolled down the street on just, its last leg. Obviously, next matchup against the Philadelphia Eagles, a game that, you know, touted one of the best historical defensive lines in NFL history, which they've only gotten more talented and more dangerous with that Georgia Bulldogs front defensive line. I think this is a matchup that is going to be intriguing. It's going to test the Bills secondary, a wide receiver core with Devonta Smith and AJ Brown and Dallas Goedert, adding in DeAndre Swift, There's so much there in that offense, especially if Swift can stay healthy. I think he is underappreciated and was in Detroit. I think this is a matchup that is going to be a back and forth style game. I think the Eagles prove they can be beaten. You saw that in the Super Bowl. I think the playbook is kind of out on how to win against them. What's your thoughts, real quick?
This is a tough stretch. I mean, they just got done with the Bengals game. They'll have that big home game against the Jets. Now they're going to Philadelphia before another trip to Kansas City. This one maybe has a little bit of a sandwich game feel to it, where maybe the Jets game's for the AFC East. Then they know they're going to Arrowhead the next week, potentially for the 1 seed. Not that you would overlook the NFC champions. I certainly am not saying that, but the Eagles to me are one team that I think actually has a better roster 1-53 than the Bills. They are loaded. They have the best offensive line in the sport. You mentioned how great their defensive line is, and they only added to it with Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith. They are a handful. They can run it down your throat. They can throw it on you. They have weapons galore. It's just going to be a fun matchup. I'm excited to see it. Anytime you can see two teams at the top of the conference play each other, especially when hopefully they're both playing at their peak, maybe it's a Super Bowl preview. I would not be stunned if the Bills lost this game. I think the Bills can play with any team in the league. So I probably won't predict them to lose this game. But the Eagles were a team that had the Bills made it out of the AFC last year. They were a team I was rooting against throughout the playoffs because I did not want to see them in the Super Bowl. They are a scary team talent-wise. They did lose both coordinators this offseason. That does have to matter a little bit.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see how they all shake out. We're heading into week 14, obviously week 13 by a very, very nice bye for a team like the Bills, who has aspirations for a deep playoff run, giving them some much needed rest at that point in the season. We head into back to Arrowhead, of course, because that's the only place we ever play the Kansas City Chiefs, in a very, very interesting matchup. We've seen the Bills can play the Kansas City Chiefs in the regular season. It's just the true test as to how we can play them. I don't think we need to spend much time. We know who this Chiefs team is. We know how talented they are. You have 3 of potential Hall of Famers in Reed, Kelsey, and Mahomes. I think this matchup is just going to be like every other one that we played them, a game that it could go either way. And we'll see.
We'll see. The Bills don't fear Arrowhead. The last 3 times they've played there, they should have gone 3-0. A historic collapse cost them that. And if the Bills win this game, it won't matter one single solitary bit in the national media. They won't get any credit for that. It'll be great, Bills. We've seen you do this in the regular season. What happens in January? In a lot of ways, the Bills have earned that reputation. So this will be a frustrating week for Bills fans, win or lose.
Correct. Yeah, it's going to be one of those ones that I think you still got to get that victory. You still got to beat them in the regular season and hope that, at this point being this late, and this is the one thing positioning in the schedule is very intriguing, is this absolutely could be the 1 seed locker. This could be the one that puts them in possession to take that 1 seed into all the way into the playoffs. Heading into week 15 against the Dallas Cowboys, I think at this point, this could potentially, Mike McCarthy could already be fired at this point. I think this team is not, I think they have a lot of issues. I'm not a Dak proponent. I think he's a very good quarterback when playing from behind. His stats are padded, generally speaking, because of the fact that Dallas is always chasing, or they're always in tight matchups, and they're just, that air raid offense. I like CeeDee Lamb. He's not as good as he was in college. He's, an talented receiver who hasn't lived up to expectations. Michael Gallup can't stay healthy. Tony Pollard is fantastic, but again, who knows what they do in that offense. I think that them losing their offensive coordinator is going to be a much bigger pitfall than they perceived. I think he was incredibly talented. I think he fell on the sword for that team when it was unnecessary. I'm not scared of the Dallas Cowboys. I'm not scared of playing Dallas in Buffalo in December, where they're going to have to play us tough, and I just don't see it.
I'm probably a little higher on them than you are, but I'm with you. I think this is a team that has potential. Micah Parsons is excellent. Diggs is obviously a really good ball hawk, although he does get beaten coverage sometimes. I like Stephon Gilmore going opposite him. I like Brandon Cooks. Honestly, I'm not sure why no team wants to keep him. They just keep trading him every couple of years. But overall, yeah, like this roster to me, I think it's NFC good. NFC is not a heavy conference. They're like, this is an NFC good team. In the AFC, I'm not even sure they'd be in the top 5 or 6. But not an easy game by any means, and certainly a potential for this team to have a season go off the rails. I wouldn't rule that possibility out. I'm not a McCarthy believer either, although it is interesting. You mentioned Kellen Moore, and that's a great transition to our next team here.
Yeah, the Chargers, man. This is a make or break season for Staley. Potentially reclamation project for Kellen Moore. Obviously we already know Justin Herbert is uber talented, a guy that coming out of Oregon was one of those quarterbacks that people perceived would be the next guy. And he is and very much has been. There's one caveat. He's very much like Phillip Rivers and just can't get it done. Doesn't have that clutch gene or just hasn't proven it yet. This could be, again, very much like Dallas. It's weird enough. This could be another one of those matchups that at this point in the season, Staley could be either standing on his last leg or potentially already 1 foot out the door. You already saw that when it came down to it, this team, even if Keenum could, get them anywhere, I just think not Keenum. Who's the
Kellen
wide receiver?
Moore? Oh, Keenan Allen?
No, Keenan Allen. Thank you.
Okay.
Keenan Allen can stay healthy for long enough throughout the season, and he's just been riddled. They added another of the same jump ball receiver in Mike Williams with Quentin Johnston. I love the Chargers. I just don't love the Chargers. I think they are the type of team that is both overwhelming and underwhelming in the same facet. They're a weird dynamic, and that's on the fact that they've relied on their run game far too heavily. If Justin Herbert can get in there and Kellen Moore can change this offense for the better, they could be really hard to play against. They could be incredibly dangerous. I just don't know if it's possible. I just don't know what they are.
The Chargers are your friend who is incredibly intelligent, and you root for him to do well in life. But before the finals in college, he goes out and gets drunk and he goes into the test hungover and forgot to study. Like, they are frustratingly talented because on paper they have superstars. Derwin James, Bosa, Khalil Mack still has a lot left in the tank, in my opinion. They have a good offensive line. Rashawn Slater, maybe one of the best tackles in the sport. You mentioned Justin Herbert. Maybe Kellen Moore can help unlock some of the downfield passing they're hoping to do. Austin Eckler is a beast in the passing game and the running game. But you're right. Like, Brandon Staley, it's got to come through. I think he was within an eyelash of being fired after the 27-point lead they blew in the playoffs last year. And if this season starts off slow, I think that their ownership could be looking at it like, okay, we have invested a lot of pieces. We keep hearing how we're one of the most talented teams, and we need a life better than being a 7 seed in the NFL. Like, we should be a team that's in the playoffs by default and challenging for championships, not going to Jacksonville round 1 of the playoffs. So I think this has definite chance to blow up in their face. And one last thing real quick, I would predict that whether they're good or bad, that stadium has more Bills fans than Chargers fans.
Yeah, I think that's an overwhelming majority, to be honest with you. It's a sad state of affair when you go to SoFi. Moving into New England in week 17, this could be a both very intriguing matchup, or again, Mac Jones could be out the door. Bailey Zappi could be the quarterback. Who knows what's going on at this point? This could be a really, really wild matchup for the Bills. And again, could even potentially be for the AFC East. We don't know how the Dolphins or the Jets are going to be at this point. I think the Bills should, again, this is in Buffalo. This could be a matchup where Buffalo is playing all of its guys because of the importance at this point. I think the Bills should win this. We already know what New England is. I think if the wheels haven't fallen off, like the last 2 games, Dallas and Chargers, it's weird. All 3 of these games are very similar in style. I think that could be happening. I don't have a lot of faith in that team, especially when the weather gets bad. You've seen Mac Jones. If this is, this is New Year's Eve, if this weather's bad, this doesn't play well into Mac Jones style. I think this is a game that could get easily just torn apart quickly.
Damian Harris, 4 touchdowns against his old team. Boom.
Yeah, that's right. I didn't even think about that. Yeah. Damian Harris revenge game right there. And then we are heading into the final game of the season. Again, another big time opponent, potentially another, season altering match against the Miami Dolphins in Miami. Quick thoughts.
Maybe more than ever in the history of my Bills fandom, I want this game not to matter for the Bills. I want them to have whatever seed they're going to have locked up so they can rest their starters in this game. Nothing sounds less appealing to me than a Bills team having to go to Miami to play in hot weather, even in January. It'll be relatively hot to what they're used to, fighting for a playoff spot, fighting for their playoff lives. That sets up to potentially gas the team right before the playoffs if they don't have a bye. So I just, fingers crossed, toes crossed, whatever. This game does not matter for the Bills, or maybe we get lucky. The Dolphins aren't as good as I think. I know you're not as high on them as me. Maybe it doesn't matter to them and they're playing Mike White because, they're resting Tua. I want this game to not matter at all. That's my thoughts, because if it matters, I think it could be a game that potentially drains the Bills' energy.
Yeah, no, I agree emphatically. If this could go very, very, polar opposite ways. At this point, the Dolphins could be in a lot of trouble if Tua is not healthy, if he hasn't made it through the season. He hasn't since high school. He has not put together a full 17-game schedule of him showing any type of health. And like you said, Mike White's fine. Matt Milano will potentially bend him in half twice. I think this is a very intriguing matchup that, like you said, I hope they don't have to worry about at that point. I think the schedule in totality is full of very intriguing matchups, timing specific, game specific, player specific, even just, very similar opponents like the Giants game, just knowing your opponent super well. I think this is a schedule that is going to be a lot of fun for the Bills and for the fans themselves, and a season that potentially, and like we've said before, because strength of schedule is nonsense, it means generally and more often than not nothing. Could be a lot of fun for a Bills team that has Super Bowl aspirations at this point. I am going to say this real quick just before I head off. Obviously, really, really, really appreciate everybody's tuning in tonight for this show. Just want to make sure you guys hit that thumbs up and hit subscribe. Josh, truly appreciate you taking your time after putting your kids down to come spend some time. If you're not checking out Josh and Luke over the Bills Chat Pod, you need to. But Josh, let everybody know how they can find you.
Yeah, so we're part of the Built in Buffalo network, so you can find us on Built in Buffalo YouTube. Twitter we'll be getting our shows going again on July 7th. We're there every Friday night at 8 p.m. Once the season starts, that is our game preview. Then we drop an audio-only podcast, although we do upload the video of that on Monday morning for post games on Bills Chat. So we're all over Twitter. We try to make YouTube our one-stop shop there for Bills content, and we may have some other fun things that we're going to announce shortly coming up for Bills Chat. So stay tuned. And Thomas, I love coming on with the Cover One guys. Every time I get invited on one of these shows, I really enjoy myself. I certainly, this is my first time being able to talk to you. I certainly enjoyed it. So thanks to you. Thanks to Cover One for having me on as always. And thanks to everybody in chat for hanging out.
Yeah, guys, again, big thanks. Make sure you're subscribing to both myself and to Josh. We're heading into training camp, like I said at the front of the show. Lots of big content. Make sure you're hitting Cover One Pass. Fantastic content, analysis, all different content that you can. I mean, there's so many different creators on Cover One that you can follow. Really, really high end stuff. Again, I truly appreciate you taking some time to spend with me over here on a Thursday night. I know it's been a long week. It's a weird week. I hope you guys really appreciate it. One thing I do want to do, as I always end the show, guys, be kind. I spent today, and I told Josh before this, I was doing, and some people know, my grandfather passed away in January. It was a little bit of an emotional wreck today, doing my best to get through things. I didn't get to, I didn't anticipate him passing away the way that he did. It was very sudden, and it was very heartbreaking. Make sure you tell those that you love. Give them a call. Let them know that you love them. Spend time with people that are important to you. Wrap your arms around people. And if you need help, like I told you before with the Jordan Poyer thing, if you're struggling, reach out to other people. Get help. Life is far too short and far too precious. Embrace it. Love it. Enjoy it. And guys, enjoy this season. Being a Bills fan is a fantastic thing. We are very fortunate to have a very good team and a very good franchise. It's going to be a big year, a big time season. I'm expecting big things from this franchise. Guys, as always, we'll see you guys next week, every Thursday, 9 p.m. on Buffalo Late Night. I'm going to end this just the way I always do. Go Bills.
The Bills make me wanna. The Bills make me